next we're going to turn to a two-part conversation about the importance of supply chain traceability in our food systems. We talked a little bit about that before. This continues it. This series is thanks to a partnership with Wholechain, our great friends there. Wholechain is a blockchain-based traceability solution built to enable trust, coordination, and transparency in fragmented global supply chains. For part one of this section, I'd like to welcome Janaya Bruce, the Senior Specialist for Climate Resilient Food Systems at the Environmental Defense Fund. Big round of applause. Pat Hudson, a farmer with, I'm gonna mess it up, I'm so sorry, Tilghman Seafood. Kerri McClimen, the Vice President of Communications for Niman Ranch. Thank you. And Jay Huang, a chef with Lucky Robot Sushi and Nomade. And before we dive in, I want, round of applause. Come on, people, work with me. And before we dive in, I want to invite Mark Kaplan, the co-founder of Wholechain, who will say a few words to set up the conversation.
Hi, everyone. First and foremost, I wanted to thank Danny and Bernie and Kenzie and Elena for including us and having such an amazing event. Thank you so much. I'm co-founder and chief sustainability officer of Wholechain, and I'm here to actually share that our Better Food Future initiative has been, we've been invited to lead a Oceans and Food System Solutions initiative for the UN Global Compact, which is the world's biggest sustainability initiative with over 23,000 private sector members. And this is because, as Danny was mentioning, whole chain traceability and traceability in general underpins issues like ranging from conservation to human rights and supply chains to food waste to food access. So it's a very all-encompassing issue. And this panel on route to market for small-scale producers and our next panel on deforestation and conversion-free supply chains are two of the initiatives that we lead. And part of this, what Yoka from Tony's Chocolonely mentioned earlier, the purpose of this is to bring partner companies together to co-invest in de-risking sustainability investments and helping those investments scale more rapidly. So thank you very much and have a great panel.
Thank you, Mark Kaplan. Such a great partner to Food Tank and such great context as we look at this discussion about a traceable route to market and the role of small-scale producers and how important they are for this. I'm also excited to share that during these next two panels, you'll have the chance to taste a few different dishes, including a passion fruit habanero shrimp cocktail, rice and roses poached catfish, and spicy akua kelp larb salad, thanks to Wholechain. So I hope that you can grab something that you can experience during the conversation and experience the traceable blue foods that we will be talking about. Thank you all again for being here. And Jay, if I could start with you, we just heard from our last panel about the leadership role that chefs are playing in our food system. How do traceable supply chains help chefs guide those eaters?
That's a good question. So, you know, when I first made Lucky Robot into sustainable sushi restaurants, I did it the simple route. You get on Seafood Watch, you look at what's red and yellow and green, and you go for it. And what's ASC certified and BAP certified and so on and so forth, right? What I found later in the journey is there are a lot of really small scale fishermen that didn't have the opportunities or the funding to get these certifications.
Right.
And it was through a lot of conversations with my purveyors and different scientists that led me down this road of which fishermen are actually providing the best practices to sustain our seafood. And you know, one of the most contentious fish in all of sushi has got to be tuna. And it's going to be bluefin tuna. And if you ask me whether or not I serve bluefin tuna on my menu, the answer is yes. And the reason being is because over the years, NOAA and ICAT have done such a great job of supporting this system and rebuilding the stock that today the stock is healthier than ever. And little do most consumers know that the bluefin tuna is the most regulated fish in the entire world, especially the fish that I use, which is rod and reel and harpoon only. One fish goes on one boat and that's it. You're supporting a single fisherman and his livelihood, and the second it's caught, you cannot throw it back. That is a fish you get.
Please give a round of applause for that. It's revolutionary. It's really revolutionary. Thank you so much, Jay. Janaya, how can organizations like EDF, the Environmental Defense Fund, where I had my very first internship, everyone, bring stakeholders together to encourage sweeping changes in procurement?
That is a fantastic question, and I'll start with a brief overview of what we're doing and why we're working with Wholechain. So EDF, our team in Mexico, works with the Yucatan red grouper fishery, and this is a fishery that's incredibly profitable for an export market, important for food security locally, and it's depleted. It's a fishery that is considered collapsed right now. So as the Environmental Defense Fund, we have been working with local communities there to design essentially a community management plan of this red grouper fishery that kind of steps outside of the traditional regulations and government management plans of fisheries to look at, okay, we have a collapsed fishery, how are we bringing together the government, bringing together scientists, and bringing together community members to rebuild this fishery, to recover this fishery that's incredibly profitable and incredibly important for food security. So it really is about bringing together all of the different stakeholders that are involved in traceability and that can reap co-benefits. So we can get benefits for fishers in terms of increased profit for their product, and then by connecting them to markets, get better products to producers, to chefs, to consumers, and to others.
I'm always interested in the process of all this, right? Because when you talk about it, it's like, yeah, that obviously that's what you do. You work with these different stakeholders. They all come together. It's not that easy. I've asked this question a lot today because I'm just really interested in the process. So when you go to community groups and say, hey, we want to collaborate with you, we want to come up with these sort of documents that are going to be in place that you've worked on and we've worked on, and we have scientific background to sort of fill in the blanks. What does that look like?
Well, first and foremost, it's about building trust and showing that you can deliver on what you're saying that you're going to deliver on. So in this case, for the red grouper fishery, it's a higher profit for the fishers in that region, and a healthier fishery, a healthier ecosystem there. So, we make that clear. We make it clear that there are multiple benefits across the system to the communities, to the consumers, to the market. But it's more than that. It's about community management. So this fishery, I mentioned it's important for food security, and it really is. There's a couple of very profitable fisheries in the region, being red grouper, lobster, and octopus, and on the off seasons for the octopus and the lobster season, they eat red grouper locally. So it really is beneficial to the communities to recover this stock of red grouper, and then also beneficial to the ecosystem, to the multiple different fisheries that are in the Yucatan region. So it's about really building that trust and ensuring that the communities know that they will be brought along every step of the way, from kind of the planning of what a management program would look like to understanding what practices they've used in the past, which ones are unsustainable, which ones could be tailored to be more sustainable, and then having really intentional discussions and decision making that bring in all of the different stakeholders.
Yeah, I just want to
stay
stay
intentionality.
with one more. I love that you said intentionality. I did not mean to interrupt, but how does the governments that you're working with respond to this?
Well, right now with the Mexican government, so they have a management plan in place, which is, it's essentially like how to manage the red grouper fishery, but it's not a recovery plan. So they recognize that it's collapsed, but they aren't actively putting in measures in place to bring it back from collapse. That being said, they have been kind of willing to work with this recovery plan that we're drafting, because it is, the actions in the recovery plan are simple, they're straightforward. It's like changing the size of hooks that fishers use, or making sure that they're only catching adult species rather than juvenile species. So because these plans are so, more or less simple, adaptable, we've been able to work with the National Institute of Fisheries in Mexico and kind of start looking into what it could look like to bring a recovery plan into a fisheries management plan, which is the first of its kind in Mexico. It hasn't been done before.
Yeah.
So it really would be a fantastic step forward for the government to recognize this as like recovery as really crucial to management.
Absolutely. Thanks for explaining all that. Kerri, I'm gonna turn to pork before I go to Pat. So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about the resources and support systems that small-scale producers and ranchers need to farm sustainably. And I should have said pork and beef and poultry, because you work on a lot of different things.
No, I appreciate that so much, Danny, and I am a little different from the others. I do represent pork, beef, and lamb, and with Niman Ranch. And one of the questions people always ask me is, where is the ranch? And I actually like that question a lot, because we work with a network of more than 600 independent family farmers. They own their own land, they own their own animals. They are in charge of their process, and they raise their animals sustainably to very strict standards that Niman Ranch has. Our protocols are on our website. We're very transparent about it. But I was listening to how complicated that was. I was thinking, I always think our world is extremely complicated. Sure. Ours are domestic, our farmers and ranchers, and they're mostly in the Midwest. But the network systems that we provide for our farmers are actually each other. It's relationship building. And I was thinking back to what the CDC said this morning, and she was talking about, technology helps a lot, but it's the relationships, and it's the interconnectedness of us with our farmers and their relationship with their land and the water and the soil. And so the resources that we provide are connecting them on a regular basis. Many of you in the audience have actually been out to one of our farms, which is unusual. And we have an event where we celebrate our farmers every August. We have a beef summit in June. Yesterday was our farmer annual meeting in Ames, Iowa. So we do have, our farmers don't really end up with the federal government support necessarily. The other farmers do, because they're smaller. I don't know if I'm answering your question right, Danny, but it's a tough question.
Good enough. I should also, full transparency, Kerri is a board member of Food Tank, so she can say anything she wants, because I need to be voted back in. Pat, I want to turn to you, because what you're doing as a producer and processor of wild blue catfish is so interesting to me, and I want you to sort of break it down for this audience who maybe some of them didn't know that there's wild blue catfish.
Okay, well, there definitely is wild blue catfish, and it's become a
If you can hold your mic a little
major
bit.
problem. I'm sorry. There definitely is a wild blue catfish, and it's become a major problem in the Chesapeake Bay. It was introduced to the bay, I believe, in the early 80s, when there was the striped bass started to decline, and they had a moratorium, so you couldn't catch the striped bass, at least in the Chesapeake Bay. And the wild blue catfish was introduced as a sport fish, and it was supposed to be limited to fresh water. It had come from the Tennessee River, the Mississippi River area, and over the years it's acclimated to brackish water, but also there have been incidents where there are storms or periods of rain where the fresh water tends to flow further down the rivers and allowing the fish to escape. So they were initially introduced in the James, which is the southern Chesapeake Bay in Virginia, and they're all the way to the northern part of the bay in the Susquehanna River. And it's been a disaster. In fact, the governor one of his first acts about a year ago was to ask the federal government for disaster relief funding. And it's probably too late. There's no way to control a fish that has the ability to travel the entire length of the bay. So for years, I worked with individuals to try to develop a plan to address the fish, and with little success, but most recently decided to commercialize the effort. And we've had amazing success, thanks to groups like Wholechain, this event, thank you very much, to be able to have really, I guess, a global audience. It's, we were at the Boston Seafood Show. We're going to be going to Barcelona in April. And it's suddenly really taken off. Not just the fact that the fish is a delicious fish. It happens to be, unlike most catfish, it's not a bottom feeder. It enjoys the entire water column of blue crab, other fish, oysters, clams, and so as a result, it's essentially a buffet of everything we love in the Chesapeake Bay, which is just an amazing body of water. So I have been working with several individuals who are very capable, and we're now being able to harvest the fish, working with fishermen, and providing this fish to the markets. And thankfully, it's really become a popular item.
That's great, and I want to stay on that with you and Kerri and Jay. Do you think that the sort of the market values environmental stewardship and social justice in a way that it didn't, say, 2-3 years ago, maybe pre-pandemic? And please answer that first, and then we'll go down the line. Go ahead.
Honestly, I think it's tougher because COVID really, was great for a small company like Niman Ranch. We did not have the logistical issues that others did. But since then, and with the inflationary pressures, and quite frankly, the greenwashing, which is why I think this panel is so important about traceability, it's really tough to compete when someone says they're just like Niman, or that they don't use antibiotics, but they're not mentioning that they don't use them until the withdrawal period, or hormones. I could go down the list, but I think it's tough. I think it's really tough to compete. And Chef, I know you feel that too, because we work with restaurants and retailers.
Yeah, it is really tough to compete, and just like Olivia said in the previous panel, everyone wants the best, but not everyone wants to pay for it. And do you choose to eat the best at home? Like, is that the choice you're making? And then are you putting that same pressure back on the restaurant? Because you'll come into my restaurant and go, well, why isn't this the best? Well, are you going to pay for it? If you're going to pay for it, I'll get you whatever you want. But that's usually the case. So yes, there's extraordinary pressure, especially in the last 2 years.
I just want to stay with you for 1 second and then turn back to Pat. The bluefin example that you gave, the bluefin tuna example you gave, is such a success story, and it's such a powerful way to really directly connect that fisher person, fisher folk, to your restaurant. What other success stories do you see sort of coming down the line like that could really help fishers and you?
I think a really great story would be the American eel. So I think most people don't know, but the Elvers go for about $10,000 a pound. And you can only catch them in the second blue moon of the year. You scoop them all up, and guess where they go? China. They don't come here. They all go to China because they've killed all their eel. And there's a really great company called American Unagi, run by Sarah, that has found a way to have an aquaculture program for American eel. And it's things like that, and she's getting to a point where it's scalable and affordable. But it'll be programs like that I think we're really excited about. That's
really cool. I want to learn more about that. Thank you. Pat, in your career, have you seen values change where folks are more interested in both the environmental justice side of this and also the social justice side? And is the market there? Are people going to pay more?
The market's definitely there. I think that the first and foremost, you try to provide a quality product.
Right.
And it's a good thing that the fish is appealing. It looks great. And we have access to the fish. So we're able to catch this fish year round. In the marketplace, the buyers want to know that they have a supply. So that's, sort of the basic task. But then one of the things that I've learned, I think is important, is a value-added market. So you try to create some excitement about something different. We're working on a catfish cake for the school systems. It's about to be approved in Maryland, and we hope to take that, beyond Maryland. There's also something that we've learned about recently, and I don't know too many of the specifics, but believe it or not, and I think this is more attributable to the Asian market. The Asian market is, just very interested in seafood. But there is a value-added byproduct market. So you take parts of the fish that we would normally not consider, and they have a tremendous value in the Asian market. I don't want to go into too many details. It's not something that we'll be serving this evening, but it's very valuable, very nutritious. I met a scientist from the University of Mississippi at the Boston Seafood event. They have a grant from USDA to study all the parts of a catfish to determine how they can add protein to diets, not just using the fillet. So what we consider parts of the fish that you would just toss.
Right.
They're now creating some pretty inventive ways to use those parts of the fish to make really interesting. Here's something that will surprise most of you. We were at an event last year in Barcelona, and I really thought this is not necessarily going to be a waste of time, but how many people are going to be interested in catfish in an international seafood event? The very first person who walked up, very excited, was an Italian scientist who was working on cosmetics. And the skin of the blue catfish is the #1 source for collagen.
Wow.
And wanted all the skins. Well, naturally, when I mentioned this to my partner, he just said, well, if you can handle that job, we'll think about it. But I've actually seen photographs of stacks of fish skins, catfish skins, that are valuable to the cosmetic market.
Yeah,
so go figure.
It's really important to remember that not all of these parts that we've been throwing away for generations need to be thrown away. I want to come to all of you for this, and it might be our final question because you all like to talk. There's the burden and the opportunity of storytelling in everything that you do, and it can be very difficult. So, Jay, let me come back to you. You've been very good about telling these stories on stage, but when you're back in the kitchen or managing a staff, how do you get this story in a way that's concise enough for that consumer to sort of take that nugget home and understand it and implement it in their own lives?
Yeah, so one of the things that we do is we have a really robust training program at Lucky Robot and at Nomade, and we love telling the story of either you talk about the bluefin tuna. That's Captain Caper out of Rye, New Hampshire. You guys can look him up. He sends me pictures of the fish he catches with his daughter and son, and I show everyone these pictures, so you have this clear connection. The beauty of doing sushi is I get to hand you a piece of fish. And I look you right in the eye and I tell you where this fish came from, who caught it, when it was caught, how long we dry age it, et cetera, et cetera. And we do the same thing at our other restaurant, right? So we use Del Pacifico blue shrimp, which is caught with little tiny skiffs. So these Mexican fishermen go out in these tiny skiffs, they're little day boats, and they go out and just catch what they can and they come back. And it's a really short season, and they've started a new program with octopus, and it's the same thing.
Yeah.
So you see this Mexican fisherman out there with a single string, a little crab, and he kind of like fishes for this octopus, and as it comes up, he grabs it, it wraps around his arm, boom, into the boat. And they have a really short season. and that's it. But every time we serve that dish, this is what we're serving you. This guy put his hands on it. It was not like the tuna we serve.
Right.
It is not some sane net that you guys think about. It's not some big tanker. It's one guy, one boat, and sometimes they do the crazy thing. They stand on the bow of the boat with a harpoon that's attached to an electric line, and they just wait and wait and wait, and boom, take them out. And then when we're cutting it, our sushi knife goes through that fish, and you go, ding. Oh, what's that? It's fleur-de-lis. It's that little harpoon tip. And we'll say that harpoon tip and show it off to every single person so they know that a person actually touched this. It did not come in some big net.
And that it's special, it's celebratory, it's seasonal, it's like this special thing that you get just once a year.
It's such a short season. So for the bluefin tuna, the season's really short, relatively short, right? So we do celebrate that seasonality from June to March, and it stops. They also stop fishing many times a year due to hitting the quota too early. They're catching too many fish, which is kind of a good problem to have in sustainability, right? So,
Sure.
And this is, again, remind you, just one boat and one fish. It's not, they're not doing a net, so.
Right. Thank you. Kerri, I want to come back to you. You mentioned, everyone wants to be like Niman, right? And sometimes they're greenwashing, they're green wishing it to be true. So differentiating yourself in the marketplace is a struggle sometimes. But you also have the greatest story of all time, which is Paul Willis.
Yeah. We do. Our founding hog farmer is from Thornton, Iowa. He's probably watching today, so hi, Paul. And he started because Alice Waters tried his pork chop. Bill Niman invited him. So, and she says the best pork chop she's ever had, and she wondered if he had any friends that were farming in Iowa. So it started out with a story. It truly did. And then he, one by one, gathered more farmers to keep up with the market. I will say that we have found that our farmers tell the story way better than we can, way better than I can, of course. And Chef, I loved your story about, visualizing it and making it real. And we do have our farmers go out. We have 78 farmer ambassadors that train once a year that go out on the road. And I think that is super cool for a brand to be able to do that. And they have so much fun meeting the chefs and meeting the customers and seeing what people are doing with their food. I have one more thing I just want to mention about the waste. And we're a whole carcass program, so we buy the whole animal. And I loved your story about the catfish. The prosciutto, that's also something, the charcuterie that you had today. So those are things that, thank goodness someone had foresight years ago. And I want to thank Food Tank for storytelling too. They have helped us tell farmer stories because they have a relationship with many of our farmers.
Thank you so much, Kerri. Pat, you've already told some great stories. Do you have a favorite one about how somebody sort of realized that catfish was this, this great resource? You talked about the collagen. You talked about, how good it can taste. Is there another anecdote you can quickly share with us?
Well, it's not good news, but there was a time about 10 years ago I was working on the Potomac River, and that happens to be, if you can envision this.
Just a little bit closer to your face, thank you.
One scientist mentioned that if God created the perfect place for the blue catfish, it would be the Potomac River. And they've grown to just tremendous numbers. And a fact that's cited is that it's 90% of the biomass of the river. So a river that once had crabs and striped bass and bass, you name it, all the great food items of the Chesapeake Bay, they're almost entirely gone. And that's just something that I think really hits home.
It is. It's something. I live in Maryland now, and it is something we have to think deeply about, and about how to restore that to make sure that we don't see that happen or continue to happen. Janaya, you were placed in a position as an environmentalist, as somebody who's deeply involved in science, to tell a very complex story to to all of us, and to, I think, and we forget this, so you're talking to policymakers, you're talking to scientists, you're talking to fishers, but you also have to explain to your members, to the people who donate monthly to the Environmental Defense Fund because they believe in the mission. It's sometimes very difficult to go through this whole process.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, at the end of the day, we're an organization that focuses on science-based policy and environmental justice, and those come with amazing stories because, oftentimes the best science does put communities first, and usually there's no way to implement the best science when you're looking at ecological restoration and fishery management without listening to the stories of communities and, being able to integrate those. So, when we look to our members, when we look to our funders, we're able to bring those voices of communities who've seen tangible impacts from some of this work, from being able to bring a higher price for fisheries, for sustainably caught fisheries, and who've seen their waters restored and seeing fish stocks bouncing back. So we're in a complicated place, but really lovely place to be able to tell so many different stories and to be able to bring those to so many different people. So thank you for having us.
Oh, thank you to the Environmental Defense Fund. They deserve lots of funding, so if you have a few dollars, please give it to them, because they hired an intern like me who knew nothing. So thank you to all of the panelists.
You've been a wonderful audience. It's been a long day.
I know. This is a great audience. Give yourselves a round of applause. Keep the blood flowing if you can. There's a lot more to come. So I think I turned my page too quickly. Hold on. Or I'm missing a page. That is not what happened. So